Hey, you're just in time. We're going to start putting back together the Smithy lathe mill drill combo. So let's get going. I want you all to remember that I'm just another yokel who's not educated nor a professional in what I'm doing here. And it's possible that if you rely on this video, you, your project, or the both of you might end up as a smoldering hunk of hammered dog shit. Please use common sense, be careful, and always protect your ears, eyes, face, body, and hands when doing this type of work. With that, let's keep on trucking. This video may contain peanuts. Hi everyone. Welcome to Werner's Whirly Gigs. Or welcome back if you've been here before. Glad to have you. This time, we're going to start putting the lathe mill drill combo back together. Now, if you're showing up and this is your first one, there's two prior videos in this series. One dealing with getting the motor working, and the second dealing with disassembling and cleaning the majority of the mill drill. And for clarification, this is a rescue. This is not a restoration. There will be no painting. There will be no changing of bearings. There will be cleaning and making sure everything is straight and true and works as it should from the factory. And that's what I'm aiming for. So stick around. It's time to start building. One last thought. I might be doing things a little out of order, but I'm going to start with the compound slide. I think that I just want to let my brain warm up a little bit. And so I'm going to go there, and then I will continue with rebuilding the main part of the lathe mill drill combo. All right, I've gathered all the parts here for the the compound slide, ready to start assembly. I ran into a couple issues. One, I found that this does not want to go on there. It's hung up on here. The first thing I'm going to do is take this over to the lathe, and first I'll try to sand on the end of this a little bit while it's spinning, and then maybe I'll get out the file. I'm not going to get out a cutter unless it's just crazy out of round or out of round, but I can feel that it's not right, and I think that's what's keeping this from wanting to go back on. It still wants, I want some friction, but not too much. So let's head over there. We're going to see if we can't bring this back into round by just going at it very lightly. So I have chucked it up. I just got some metric 5C collets not that long ago, and I have a 12 millimeter collet, which is perfect. And I'm actually more excited about it because my SAE collets couldn't get a good bite on this, and I remembered, hey, I just got those metric collets. So I've got them here mounted in the chuck of my lathe, and I'm not going to be using any of the cutting part. I just wanted to hold this steady and let it spin. And I'm going to run a file over the end of this. Well, actually, first I'm going to start with some sandpaper. Let's just be cautious. So I've got some 220 sandpaper. Let's just see if I can make this work a little bit better. Because right now, this doesn't want to go on here. And it really doesn't want to go on here too much. I don't like it. So I want to make it a little bit more easy. Try that again. I may go to the file, but I'll get here sooner. Alright, let's see what that did. Oh, okay, we're making some progress. I am just going to go after it with the file just a little bit. It's good, but again, just want a little more. There we go. Still some resistance, but I can get it on there without having to just fight it. Okay, we're back. So let's start putting this thing together. I've already done a little bit of work. I put the jib screws in, and that's about it. Put the screws in over here and these here, but we'll get back to that. So I've had a little practice, and I know the order of things, or a better order of things. So we're going to start right here. This is the screw that goes up through the center of the tool post. And it needs to go in there before anything else happens because the screw rides over it. So for now, we're just going to work here onto the end of the table. And then we're going to take this screw and insert it through. And I just put a little bit of oil on it. The manual, by the way, says to use DTE heavy medium oil. I think that's a mobile designation. It's 20 weight, which is ISO 68. The manual actually does not say that. It says use SAE 20 machine oil. And I happen to have a 5-gallon jug of this DTE heavy medium sitting around. So I'm just going to put this in here just to get it going. And on this thing, you want to put the knurl towards the outside because that's where your finger is going to be. And also the other clue is that the numbers are facing towards you in this direction. And we want to pull this on here. Okay. And then the next thing we want to do is put on these spanner nuts, which I just am not a fan of, but that's okay. Okay. And we'll put on the second one. Now the idea with these, in case you're not familiar with this process of having two nuts side by side, you probably heard or know that two nuts will lock together. And in this case, that's the ultimate outcome. But with this first nut, we only want to have this tight enough on this so that it still spins just fine. You know, if you were to tighten this up really hard, then this becomes difficult to turn. So you don't want it tight. You just want it lighter than snug, just enough so that this thing, this stays, the collar stays tight on the screw and doesn't walk away. Now I have a spanner wrench but these spanner nuts are so small, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. And so what I often do is I try to figure out where the first nut is going to end up. And right now, this line right here is almost lined up with the 0. And I know I'm probably going to tighten this somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of a turn to snug it up. So I'm going to turn this back 1/4 of a turn. And then I'm going to bring this and tighten it up. And then, unfortunately, the only tool I have is a hammer and a screwdriver. That's what I'm going to use, and I'm going to try to get this to tighten up. I guess actually at this point, before I go further, I'll put this on. So I'll start with a jib. Now these screws, the jib screws are through enough so that they are holding the jib in place, but they are not putting pressure on it so that there's the maximum amount of room to get the dovetails into place on the base of the slide. Well, I forgot something. Forgot the nut, the brass nut. Okay, try this again. That was too easy. Okay. All right, so this is coming together. Let's flip this over. And we'll come back and tighten up the jibs. When you're doing this, you want to, since I have it right set up, you want to hold this up, because otherwise it's going to relax and fall into something and cause some interference. And this will be held up later when we actually install the tool holder on top of it. And that actually felt really nice, the way this is turning. There's no real differentiation in the space between this face and the collar. So, all right, let's look back at this number 0 here. I'm going to just hit this a little bit again, try to get a little more tight. Oh, that's almost perfect. I can just see a hair of a wiggle, but not a lot. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's let's move on and put on this handle that hopefully now we have set up correctly. I made some marks on the end here because one of these holes is bigger than the other. Because this tapered pin can only go through one way. So I put some marks so I would remember how it went together, and it needs to go together like this. I tried it the other way and it actually doesn't work. Theoretically it should go both ways, but when you go in the other way, it just will not line up correctly. Okay. And then I'm going to just use this to try to get things lined up on both ends. This is just a tapered pick, but I'm hoping that it's going to just get everything lined up so things can move through here smoothly. Okay, that's looking all right. And then try tapping on it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to say that's working. So try something like this. Put this down. Okay, we're almost there. Alright, that's a pretty nice fit. I may hit that in a few more so it's flush, but I'm going to not deal with that right now. Okay, I failed to put, of course, oil on the ways, so I'll just drop it through these holes right here. Okay, finally we're going to tighten up these jib screws. And the trick here is you want to tighten up till they touch. Let's just see how that feels. One of them's loose and one's tight, it feels like. I think I was wrong about that. I think there's just a little bit too much drag. So the idea is you want to tighten them up till they touch and it can't move, and you just back it off ever so slightly. Yeah, that feels pretty good. And then take your wrench and your screwdriver, and hopefully you can hold the screw in place. And tighten the nut. I'll say that a screwdriver is not the best tool for this. I'd much rather some kind of a hex head. Yeah, that's pretty good. Alright, both of those screws were good about not turning with the nut. Okay, so that part is done. Okay, the next piece we're going to put on is this little spring stopper. And there's the machine oil. This just sits in here. And this is what mates up against these and causes it to stop in the preferred position. Only spins left. Okay, and then next we're going to put on this washer. And finally, this handled nut. And last but not least, we'll mount it up on the nuts on the swivel. Just drop a little oil on there, on the surfaces that'll slide. Sure is tight in here. And they have these nice little cutouts here, so actually I need to back out this screw. Actually, I need to back out the entire base to get it started. Let's do the same on the other side. It's kind of tight in here, but I guess I understand what they were trying to do. One of their answers would have been to make the base a little bit larger rather than cut away this notch in here. to make room for the nut. I guess the metal in the base is more expensive than it costs to make the little cutout, and that's why the bean counters went that way. Could be wrong. So you can see there's not really anything easy about this. It's not rocket science. And we're going to call that's a 12. I got a 12 and a 13 just in case. And with good thing it's a 13, I bet. Yep. Okay, there we go. It's time. Time to start building. So I'm going to mount it the same way it was before, with the mill head and the lathe head stock over here. I'm not going to bolt it down to the table, only because that's the way I found it and received it. I guess if the new owner wants to do that, they're more than welcome to, obviously. But I don't want to deliver to them a table with holes in it if that's not what they would like, or how they would like to use it. So I'm going to start with this can. And here we have the actual lathe. Well, hey everyone, this is Andrew from the future saying, don't forget to put on the carrying handles and the motor bracket before you do everything else. You especially don't want to put just about the whole lathe together and then realize that you forgot to do this, like I did, because this thing is too heavy to move around. And now to put on these brackets, which I foolishly failed to do earlier. This is where I try to make myself feel better and say this is how we learn. Now, the first thing that's going to go on here is the lathe transmission. And we're really ready to put this thing on. And there are these two holes here. So these two holes are what tie this piece down to the lathe body. And then there's these. These lock things down. I'm still a little uncertain about it only because I am. trying to get the bolt up into the lathe headstock. I'll stop here and say, I'm not sure how to align this. And at this moment, we have nothing to align it with. Ideally, of course, it needs to be aligned to the tailstock. And so I think for the time being, I'm going to start this and keep it on here loosely and go ahead and set up the tailstock and the slides. And then when we have the tailstock on here, we can come back and align the headstock to the tailstock, hopefully to create a more precise tool. There's no jib in here, so you just use these little pieces that I was showing you earlier, the little cylinders that are cut at an angle that are meant to align things. Of course, again, hard to say that it's aligned. Whatever you do, don't let me forget to go back and tighten this all up. It's on you. Our next task is to put the selector knob on here. Not a difficult task, except that it also has a spring and a ball bearing. And so, most likely, this is going to hurt me more than it does you. Now here's the pin that holds the handle in place. Let's just figure out which way it goes first. Okay, so on here, this is definitely the small side. Now, this actually is also conical shaped, the hole. It'll only go in this way that far, but on this side it will go much further. So, and I remember we knocked it out this way. Now we also have to deal with this spring and a ball bearing that falls into these detents here. That's going to be a little tricky. So I'm just going to grab some super duper grease, and put a little bit on the ball. And I'm hoping that will just keep it in place long enough. You know, the other option would be actually to put it on the ball and put it in one of the holes. You know, that actually might be a better outcome. I remember when I took it out, it was sitting up there, didn't fall down, so maybe, just maybe. Okay, actually that looks pretty good. Oh my gosh. Wow, that worked rather well. Okay, mission accomplished. So let's start easy on this one. We've got the wipers here. The rubber, it's a rubber and metal piece, and the metal goes on top and sandwiches the rubber. There's 4 of them, 2 at either end. All right, let's see how well these slide over. Pretty good. I was a little worried about it. I think it's going to be fine. Maybe I'll loosen them and let them fall into a more natural place in the next round. Just wanted to make sure that they're wiping. Did anyone catch the mistake? I'm not going to be able to get a screw in there, so I need to exchange this one for this one, which has a cutout. So I'll do that and come back. Okay, now we're going to run in the jib screws for this, which hold this slide onto here. And hopefully you can see nice hex head screws, not the crappy stuff with a flathead screwdriver. Alright, so let's drop these in here and run them in. And I'm going to run them in just far enough that they stick out so that they can actually engage with the jibs, but not so much that they actually push the jibs away from the dovetail. We'll do that once we get it in place. For the moment, at least, the parts pile over here has grown some more. This handle, we're going to start with this goes here, and this is this locks. This is for, it applies pressure to the jib and locks the table in place when it's moving, or actually locks this slide in place. So for the moment, what we want to do is, we already have our two screws in here, and now we have this piece. That all holds the jib in place. I've just polished this a little bit with my flat stone, just to hopefully make it slide easier. That's sketchy, isn't it? And I'm just going to squirt a little whey oil onto that whey, or that jib, excuse me. And then let's try to slide this thing on. All right, here we go. And I guess actually we would want a little oil on here. Okay, it slides pretty nice. I forgot to install this locking pin under where the handle goes, this guy. So we're going to do that. I've already pulled the handle out, and it needs to meet like this. So we'll just push it through. Actually, let's put a dab of oil in there. And see, now with that locked, this doesn't move. Okay, now for the jib on the table. And then this is the locking pin to hold the table in place, and it's held with this piece. Now I'm going to give this one a little polish as well. Alright, and lastly we have the brass nut for the screw. Well, this shouldn't be moving around too much. It may just a hair, so put a little oil in there just to facilitate. Although, it'll dry out. At this point, I'm not exactly sure about the best order to put things together. But I'm going to start here with the screw. There's probably several ways that you can come at it. And I believe this screw here is to take up backlash. Well, I don't know that it's doing anything. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's better. Okay, there's no more play. That's great. Alrighty, then let's put a little oil on the ways. Slides nicely. Alright, and then we'll continue to screw this part in. I just want to get it in far enough so we can attach it to the table without it being way off balance. In case you were wondering what I was doing below, there's a set screw right here with a lock nut on it, and it slides into an indent or a detent on one of the collars that sits on this screw, and that keeps that collar piece sitting inside of this cast piece here, and it also lines up the top, which has an oil cup hole there. So I was just getting everything lined up, and then I threaded the screw in and tightened up the lock nut. Next, I'm going to mount the mate to that cap here on the back, and this captures the other end of the screw. And then these will get fastened down with 4 bolts. We're ready to put the main screw on that drives the carriage and the table here. Fairly simple process. We've got 2 brackets like this, one at either end. Both have 2 alignment pins on it, and then 2 bolts that hold it in place. A couple things that we need to be thoughtful about. One, this piece here, this bushing, has a divot here, and we need to lock this screw into it. And why is that? That is because the oil cup's on the other side, and so it needs to drop oil through this hole. So we just want to make sure they're lined up. The second thing would be to make an adjustment to the brass nut if needed, but there's a little bit of back play, not a lot. Just give it a little bit of a tight and see what happens. Give it a little bit more. And a little bit more. Maybe even a little more. That feels better. It's not snug or anything, but I can't walk it anymore. So I think I like that. We'll see, though, when we get to the middle, or the ends, whether it creates any problems. Okay, so we've got everything here lined up. I'm going to start at the front end of the lathe, or the left end, and just get the 2 pins aligned in here. Then we're going to put the hole in this bushing up where we need to have the oil cup line up. Bring this over. Whoops. Okay, now there's one other part to this balancing trick, which is we need to also connect this plate to the bottom of the nut, the brass nut, so that the screw gets connected to the carriage. So we'll do that in a second. First thing we're going to do is line up the oil hole, get the pins in all the way in, and anchor those down with some screws. First thing I want to do is get this end lined up and just deal with this little oil hole. So drive that in while holding it. Okay, is that good? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we got that in there. We want to tighten this up. So 3mm hex screw. Okay, that's tight. And we need to come back with a 10mm wrench. Squirrel, no. Come on, guy. Go. You need to go. Yeah, right, my head is not a window. Just getting a little flustered because there is a squirrel that thinks all of the waterproof outlets outside are his teeth sharpening stations. And that's not really the case. Next, we'll fasten these down. Okay. And there's two more at the other end. We also need to tighten these two caps at the end of the table before we do that next step. And I don't think I'd tightened them before. There's two at the back here and two at the front. I mean, there's one cap at the back, one cap at the front, and then two bolts at each end. Socket head set screws, or cap screws, socket head cap screws. So there's a screw that holds this plate onto the brass nut, and you cannot install that screw while you cannot install the bolt that goes through the plate into the brass nut if the screw, the horizontal screw for moving the carriage, is installed on the lathe. So I had to pull it back off. Now the screw, the bolt, the machine screw, is into the nut, and now I need to come back in and mount this plate onto the machine. Of course, I've got to get the pins lined up, and that actually wasn't too bad. Somehow I misplaced one of the machine screws that holds this plate on, so I'm just replacing it for the time being with a pair of steel colored screws. They're actually stainless. I will come back and replace them as soon as I find the other screw. For now I only have one. Okay, so this is installed. I had to pull off this end cap, so we need to put this back on. Alright, we're actually getting to the finished details of the lathe bed. So first we need to slide on this dial, and thankfully it's not a big task. You put this clip on here first. Not quite sure. I guess it just keeps it from moving around a little bit. I'm not sure, but that's the way it was when we started, so that's the way we're gonna finish. And this piece slides on. We need to reinstall the key, and I'm just gonna touch it up a little bit with my stone. Alright, let's see how this will do. These kind of keys always present a little bit of a challenge. What I like to do is just crush them in. There, that went pretty well. Okey-dokey. And notice these are flat jaws. Okay. Okay, I think that's down and tight. Go get a wrench for that. 17 it is. Okay, one down. Right, now we're going to work on this cross slide. So let's hope this one goes on as easily. Really shouldn't voice those things. They usually end up a disaster. Whoop. Okay, put the clip on again. Okay. Then goes the washer. Then the key, which I dressed. Let's hope it squeezes down in there. Again, using my toothless pliers. Okay. Perfect. All right, let's hit the oil balls again, or oil cups. Anybody else have trouble with these? Sometimes I can't tell if they're working. Take them apart and look inside and see if the oil's getting through, and it is, even though it barely sounds like it. It feels like it, excuse me. Got another one under here. There's also over here. Those I like. The balls sink down in well, and you can really tell the oil's getting in. They're slightly larger, like this one. Let's head around to the back and look for the same. All right, nothing more back here. I still need to put in the lock for the carriage here, and it's a handle that goes here in the center hole, and inside of that is a one of those cylindrical pieces of metal that is cut off at an angle so that it can mate up with and push on the back of the jib. Okay, so this is tightened up all the way. Then we just need to screw in the handle. And so now, see, I can turn the handle, turning the handle and the table's moving, but if I lock this in, it can't turn anymore. So nice feature to have when you need it. Here's a little trick you can use if you haven't seen this before. When I was putting that handle in just a moment ago, I realized that it had the wrong cylindrical pin in it, and I had to get the one out of here. Well, there's no way to just pick it out other than taking the whole slide off, and I just didn't want to do that. So what you can do is fish it out with a magnet. Now I don't have a magnet that small on a stick, but what you can do, I've got these two magnets here. They're the really strong type, and hopefully I can go in here, and pull it out like that. So if you ever find yourself in a bind and need to do that, your tool doesn't necessarily have to be magnetic as long as it's steel, and you can magnetize it with a magnet to get the job done. All right, now we're going to put on this piece, the screw guard, I guess is what it would be called, or something similar, and it mounts on top of one of these scrapers. El Paso, we have a problem, and it's not with your zesty, tangy, picante salsa. The problem is that I misplaced the jib for the tailstock, and that's a bummer because, well, it's just a bummer, but the next step was going to be to align the headstock with the tailstock. But I can't do that without a jib, so I either have to find it or make it or buy it. But we're getting close to the deadline, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get it done before I have to release the next video. So we're going to stop here. As always, thank you for coming by. If you have questions, please leave a comment, or if you just want to tell me how much my videos suck, leave me a comment, but then tell me why, at least. Don't just give me a thumbs down. That's kind of a lame thing to do without explaining yourself. So, I guess I'll see you the next time. So long for now.